Jordan. We've got a cast of thousands, and we have a lot of distinguished guests coming in and visiting us. One such guest is here right now. You'll know this voice. You've seen him on TV. You heard him on the radio for many years here in this market. Tim Taylor is joining us. Tim, how are you?
I'm great. Great to be here. What a crowd.
Oh, I know.
I told Goddard this is now rivaling the Woolly Bear Festival out in Vermilion. I'm just amazed I couldn't even find a place to park out there.
I couldn't either. Apparently, there was a WIXY limo, and I didn't get picked up, and I'm still upset about that. But I know it's already starting.
I think maybe the Duke or Larry Morrow was in it.
Yeah, he probably was. maybe the Wild Child sitting in the back seat.
Right.
Anyway, you've had a very distinguished career. I mean, we all know about your TV career, but you started in radio, as many TV personalities have. Tell us about that.
Started in Cleveland at the age of 21 at WHK when it was colored Channel 14. WHK. The Good Guys, we all remember the Good Guys. Mm-hmm. At that point, WIXY didn't really exist. And I did the WHK newscast with a ticker behind it, WHK Action Central News. And that's how I started in Cleveland. And I thought I was in Hollywood at the age of 21. So I did that for about 7 years, and then moved over to DOK and would do the DOK Morning News. And that was in the same place, in the same building with WIXY at the time.
Okay.
I was in the same newsroom, as a matter of fact, and then I'd go to Channel 5 for the rest of the day. So that gave me my entree into television, and from 5 and 77, I went over to Channel 8 for the next 30 years.
And what a career it was. Now, when you were, I remember you from the 1970s doing Troubleshooter Tim Taylor.
That's right.
On Channel 5, Eyewitness News.
They called me the action reporter, and I would get action. Hey, there's a friend of mine out there. I would get people some action on things that they couldn't get done themselves.
Okay.
And I actually built a reputation on that, and people, it was really funny. People so took to that feature. That was the first time anyone had done that in a major market. Mm-hmm. And all at once, my Q rating, which, as you know, is do people know you, like you,
yes,
etc. My Q rating had risen to the level of an anchor because I was involved in the lives of people in Cleveland and helping them out. So it was a tremendous image builder before I started actually anchoring the news.
I remember the promos. Yeah, that's very true. And then you came over to Channel 8 and finished what had been a distinguished career.
Well, at Channel 8, I'm very proud to say several milestones. I began co-anchoring with Judd Hambrick, John's brother.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And John left within about 2 or 3 years, and then I got hooked up with Tana Carley, and we were the first male-female tandem in the news business, and we just took off.
Oh, I know.
And I think it was Virgil Dominic told me, for between 15 and 18 years straight, we were #1 by far. With Tana, and then Denise DeCenzo, and then Denise DeFala, then Robin Swoboda, and then Wilma. So,
and we always watched. I know at our house it was Channel 8 first at our house.
Well,
for many years.
I appreciate it, and we were very lucky. And we had a great team, of course, with Casey, and Casey Coleman, and John Telich, and of course Dick Goddard was always there to make us laugh during newscasts. Even on the most serious news stories, he would break me up. And I broke up. People say, "Oh, gee, I never heard you make a mistake on the air," and I said, "That's because you weren't listening closely." Because he would do. Goddard is the original Wild Child. People don't know that, but he is. He revels in chaos. He revels in it. I remember once he brought a box of kittens in to give away during his segment of the show, and just as we hit the air and I said, "Good evening," the kittens got loose and they ran and they were crawling up my leg, crawling up Swoboda's leg.
Oh, no.
And he was crawling under the desk, collecting them, laughing while I'm trying to deliver a serious news story. Yeah.
Tim Taylor joining us here on WIXY1260, talking about his distinguished radio and TV career. Is there a news story that really sticks out in your years in broadcasting?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's an extremely negative, painful one, and you may remember the little boy who was 8 years old who went missing supposedly at Parmatown. This is back in the, I think it was around 75 or 76. Mm-hmm. Turned out he really wasn't missing, as his mother had said, and he was murdered in their home.
Oh, my.
And that story got national headlines. It actually involved a doctor who was her live-in boyfriend. And we were instrumental in breaking that story because we got the only interview with him in that house. And he actually broke down during the interview, and he was arrested about 2 hours later. But it was frightening, and it also was so sad because we could all identify with losing a child and et cetera. But it's always the stories that involve children that are so difficult to take over the years. Many tragedies,
Now, Tim, in doing stories like this, as you just said, it affects us the most. Now, as a broadcaster, is there a way that you have to try to separate yourself from getting too emotionally involved? I mean, we hear about this all the time, about people not getting emotionally involved in jobs where human nature would be to do that.
You know, you do the best you can, and I never had anyone accuse me of showing my feelings on the air. So apparently, but I was deeply affected, and we all were. And it's only natural. We have children, now we have grandchildren. You wouldn't be human if you weren't affected.
Right.
The idea is, though, is to never allow your personal feelings to become obvious, particularly on television. Radio, you can conceal it pretty much, but television, all you have to do is raise an eyebrow a certain way, and people absolutely know your political persuasion, which is what bothers me now that I'm retired, is it's so obvious. The line, there used to be a very firm line between what was commentary and news. Now the line is totally obliterated. We all know what everybody feels. We know what their political persuasions are. And I think the country is a loser for that.
Yeah.
Because we need a vibrant, free press to protect all of us from what can and does occur.
Yeah, because I think as you said, I mean, that we have a lot of biased media, and regardless of what your political persuasion may be, I mean, there's NBC, there's Fox News, whatever.
Right.
And it just seems we've gotten away from just being straight news, which I think, I would have to agree. That is kind of sad that we've gotten away from that, from the news that you and I mean, that you were a part of, and that we all grew up.
I think one of the most interesting examples of that is that Walter Cronkite delivered the news.
I was just about to say during the Kennedy assassination.
He was the most trusted man in America, which means he never displayed any bias one way or the other. And yet after we retired, we all learned that he was a raging liberal.
Yep.
But to his credit, no one ever knew that.
The only time he ever showed emotion on the air, as we all know, when he had to tell the world that he had to take his glasses off and broke down a little bit and had to tell the country that President Kennedy was dead.
Exactly, and that's the only time. And I don't consider that a bias in any way.
Not at all.
I think it was a natural reaction.
Right.
I'm amazed that he was as composed as he was under the circumstances.
Oh, this is great. Tim Taylor joining us here on WIXY1260. We're broadcasting live at Ghoulardifest. Folks, come on down here. It's the address is 11500 Brook Park Road in beautiful Brooklyn. We're here till 7 o'clock tonight and 11 to 4 tomorrow. So now we've talked about your most important story. Now you had mentioned before you'd hit some hijinks off camera and even on camera. But what is your most memorable light moment?
Light moment?
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I contributed dozens of light moments to Goddard's book that was released a couple of years ago called 6 Inches of Partly Cloudy. But I told Tom Farron, who helped Dick with the book, that I still have another book in me with stories, because I have literally hundreds of them, and most of them involve Goddard. Now, I'll tell you one of them because it involves someone now that was actually our sportscaster at the time back in the early 80s. I don't know whether you remember Fred McLeod was actually on our station at the time.
Yep.
And Fred, like my friend and the departed Gib Shanley, would dress in outrageous garb. That's what sportscasters did at the time. Freddie had a maroon suit on that day and high Cuban heels, and the floor in the studio had just been waxed. All right? Now, at the beginning of the show, we each had a line. Now, they don't do that anymore, but they used to do that. In fact, if you want to see how that's done, just see the new Ron Burgundy movie.
Oh, right, Anchorman, yeah.
Right, you know, how they go around, and I have, and this is, you know, whatever. So on this particular day, my lead story involved a jogger who was hit by a car right outside the Fox 8 studios.
Okay.
And the first line of it was that he was hit and flung through the air. So we all deliver our lines, and now they go to the open. Now, during the open, because they come out on a two-shot, Goddard and our sports guy, Fred McLeod, would leave the set, and we were on a riser. As we hit the air, McLeod, and I'm saying, good evening, a tragic accident outside the Fox 8 studios today, as a young jogger was struck by a car and flung through the air. As I say flung through the air, McLeod hits the newly waxed floor, and right in front of me is suspended in the air. I mean, he went up and he crashed to the floor right in front of me. Now remember, we're in video, so the people at home don't see this. They just know that I'm going, was flung through the air, and Now Goddard, never to miss an opportunity, rushes over, and as Fred collapses on the floor, he runs over, and at the top of his lungs, he goes, safe. Now that was one of the most. Now, how I ever got through that story, but he did that to me so many. I can't tell you the times that he would break me up, because Dick knows no bounds. He has, in many ways, he was like Ghoulardi, who, as you know, was management could never control him. Well, management, even to this day, cannot control Goddard.
Right.
You don't control him. You know what you're getting when you hire Dick Goddard.
For sure.
So he'd be getting raps, and then they come in my IFB and they go, Tim, tell Goddard to wrap it up. I said, I can't tell him to wrap it up. You know, you guys, and so there's never any. I'll give you one more story. Goddard has very small feet, and so he loves tennis shoes, and he buys tennis shoes in the children's department. And so he got his new tennis shoes on, and this is only a few years ago. He was going to dinner with some friends, and he was wearing his new tennis shoes, and he was being seated by the maitre d'. Now, remember, he bought them in the children's department. As they're walking across the floor, his friends look down and go, Dick, do you know your shoes are lighting up?
Oh, boy. Wow.
Anyway, there
are things you don't see on TV.
There are literally hundreds of stories, and I told Farron I've got to add to my story list and write a book. Yeah.
You need to get that book out.
Yeah,
really,
you definitely do. See, this is, you tell people, and as an instructor, a broadcast school instructor, as I am, you tell kids certain things as they're trying to get into the business. What advice would you give someone who is entering our business?
Well, the examples that I've given you are some examples of not completely falling apart on the air. I always tell youngsters that they pay you well as an anchor, not for when everything goes smoothly, but how you handle everything when it falls apart. And then I always say, and, by the way, that occurs almost every night. Because just like, as you know, in radio, and television in particular, where everything's timed out, I always say a live TV newscast is very much like having a baby in the back of a taxi, night after night after night. And so they pay you well because you can handle that stuff. And the producer is in. That's what people at home don't understand. While I'm reading, they're talking to me. While you're juggling 10 balls at one time, that's what you have to be prepared for. And that's why you need to be able to read so well. And I mean, to the point where you have to be able to read something succinctly while you're not even thinking about it, because somebody's talking to you about something else in your ear. So being able to read and write, and I mean well, really well, they're just so important. But anyway, that's the advice. But I also tell them, if you have a passion for whatever you're doing, don't ever give up on your dream or your passion. If you're passionate about it, it'll happen.
That's what I tell my students every day, and it's nice to know that that's backed up by someone of your stature. That's great.
Well, it's because it's accurate.
Well,
and by the way, kids nowadays also seem to be, they always want to know how much money can I make down the road. Just as a point of reference, and I'm sure all of you in the booth here can identify with it, when I started out, I was making $1 an hour, and I was driving to Ashtabula, round trip every day for $1 an hour, and then I went to Akron and got a raise to about $4.50 a month, which seemed like, and at that point, Joel Rose, who was the news director at the station that hired me in Akron, recommended me for HK, and as I said earlier, I was only 21 years old.
Right.
So when I went to HK, it was like, you can see, going from making $1 an hour and then $4.50 a month to going to Cleveland was like, I'm in Hollywood. But anyway, that's what you have to do.
Sure.
I would have worked for free to get the experience. Mm-hmm. And I guess I did work for free in a way.
This has been great to talk to you and to get your thoughts and looking back on all your years in the business. Tim Taylor, thanks so much for being a part of our lives. Really, bringing us the news, telling us what's happening, and doing it in a very professional manner, and sharing some funny stories with us. Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thanks for going back, and we're going to go back here. Going back to 1970, it's Krabby Appleton and Go Back right here on WIXY 1260.